Good morning and welcome to Gainsborough Studio. We are, I think, on episode, is it 27, 28? It's a few, and we're back again here in the studio. We left you last week, I think. Eric had done his trip around the world, come back, and Hermitage Hall, which was your property that you'd purchased in Stoke Ferry, a Georgian house that needed a bit.
You're getting it mixed up. Hermitage Hall was at Downham Market.
Oh, sorry.
This was the site by the river where I had Collector's World.
Right, sorry.
And we had just got rid of Collector's World. With very great sadness. It was a mile of collections, 70,000 visitors a year. But my dear wife, my late wife,
she'd had enough.
and felt she'd had enough, and she wanted a bit of peace and quiet. You see, when I first retired, I bought Well Manor, and there my agile mind, I had an agile mind in those days, I started Norfolk Punch in my retirement, and that grew to an international product. We're making 1 million bottles a year, and I sold out to IDV, and so that had annoyed her, but I did the sail out for her. But then, of course, from there we went to this lovely farm beside the river with woods and walks and lovely things. And of course, she liked it there. But then, of course, I spoilt that for her, which I say that with great regret, because I started Collector's World there, all my collections over the years. And we built up to 70,000 visitors. And of course, there was my poor wife who loved solitude and quietness, and she had all these thousands of peoples and cars and what's it. So we got rid of that for that reason, and she was very pleased with that. And then, of course, it all came about rather suddenly at the end. I think we explained it in another one of our episodes. And I bought this property in Stoke Ferry, All Saints House. And this is where we get the name for all the different charities and bits and pieces, because we based it, that is the headquarters of it. It still is. But that was why we moved there. But we went on a trip around the world, really, to get all this out of our minds. And we came back, and of course we found this. I bought the property really only to store furniture in, because it had been part of a brewery. It was an old Georgian house, and it had a great barn behind it, and it wasn't really so much, how shall I say, it wasn't a good living place, because it was
good storage place.
But I bought it to store. But then I saw the potential of it, because the old Georgian houses were beautiful, and the terraced houses are in a breed of their own. They were very fashionable. And what people don't realise, they used to have a main living room which ran the whole length of the house on the first floor. And then the servants would be up above their bedrooms were above that first floor, and then the servants were above that on the floor above it.
Oh, I'm with you.
And of course the ground floor was the office space, or studies and libraries and whatever they wanted. And so I got intrigued with this, and I thought, well, wouldn't it be nice to restore it? So the first floor, this huge room, had been divided off. So I thought, well, the first thing we'll do, we'll put that back as it was. And then there was a limited bedroom space. I don't remember how many, it was only 4 or 5 bedrooms. So what we did, I looked at this barn, which was attached to the house, and I realised that originally it perhaps had been part of the house.
Oh, it was that old, was it?
Oh, yes.
Oh, right.
And so what I did, I put a floor back in. I think the floor must have gone from it. So I put the floor back in, connected it back to the house.
Oh, right.
And in that, the top floor, we made into a very lovely bedroom for ourselves. And next to it, we put this bathroom. I shall always remember that bathroom, underfloor heating. It had a steam bath in it.
Oh, the whole bit.
And we put a big television set over the bath with
with
a waterproof, remote on it, so you could lie in the bath and change it. It's still there to this day. And then in the house, we made a sauna room in a wet room, and it was great fun. And it was a lovely house by the time we'd finished.
But you had neighbours.
But this was the big problem. My poor wife, she was very quiet and she liked solitude, and there we had neighbours on either side and neighbours at the back, and there wasn't much of a garden, I might add.
No.
And so she wasn't very happy with it.
No.
And she liked the house, and she liked, you know, what's it. But you may recall that when I started Collector's World, and she'd lost a lot of her privacy and what's it, we got a flat in King's Lynn.
Oh yes,
right on the river.
Yeah.
It was lovely. It was right against the water. So when the tide came in, you had the water lapping outside your window.
Oh right.
And you could sit in that window and look up the river to the sea. It was a gorgeous
lots,
flat. We've still got it, but it was a lovely flat. So what we were doing, we were starting, of course, to come from Stoke Ferry, spend a lot of time in the flat at King's Lynn.
Oh right, she preferred that then.
She preferred that. So I thought, well, I've got this huge house there. We must. So this is where I started using it for the offices, and I had a secretary who'd been with me for 30 years, Norma.
Really?
I must mention Norma, dear Norma.
Well done, Norma.
She put up with me for 30 years.
I was thinking that. Patience of a saint.
Absolutely.
Long service medal.
Long service medal.
Yeah.
And so we established, you know, this office, and as you know, I had done a lot with television right back. In fact, I brought one of the
in the early days.
First, this was back at Arundel Priory, which we covered, and I brought in one of the first recorders for television. I'd set up a studio to produce tapes, you know, well, they weren't DVDs, you know, they were tapes, big tapes. And in fact, not the sort that VHS tapes, it was the tape before that.
My goodie.
But I set up a studio in a mobile studio. We got a HGV, I got my HGV license, I might add, to drive it.
Right.
And, but the trouble was we made these things, but we couldn't sell them because nobody had the equipment to play them. You see, we were in advance of our times.
Right.
So I've always been very fascinated with television. As you know, I presented a series of programs because I've got a number of inventions, and I presented a series of programs called Pure Invention, which was the forerunner of Tomorrow's World. Which was a great program. And of course, I still, from my war years, I still ate fire and magic, and I did the first episode, was in the first episode, or one of the episodes, with Richard Green in the first Robin Hood. Do you remember the Robin Hood things?
Could we ever forget it? I mean, it was compulsive viewing.
It was compulsive viewing.
It was good, though. I mean, it was a well put together program.
It was,
and the kids loved it.
So there was I was very fascinated with the internet. Now, this is 10 years ago, and the internet, since the last 10 years, have come on all like a rocket. But I thought, well, here is the answer to all the problems, because this is where people should have local television stations, and this is the future of local news.
Right.
Because obviously, if you've got the internet to broadcast over, it's ideal. So I thought, well, what am I going to do to make this house, you know, how shall I say, not pay for itself, but to justify have a function. So I thought, well, I'd set up a studio in it and try out this idea.
This was at Stoke Ferry?
At Stoke Ferry.
Right.
So we set it all up, and it was fortunately next to this big room was a smaller room, I suppose, servants' room or whatever it was, where we were able to work as a control room and do it.
All right.
But then, of course, I hit the snag. These were early days, and we were too far from the telephone exchange, so they couldn't stream
the cable
it.
link. Oh, right.
So I thought, well, God, now what we do? So I thought, well, this is the future of local news. So in King's Lynn, oh no, let me think, there's a step before that. What happened was, I thought, what am I going to do? And this, I think, if you've read my little book, The Answer to Everything, there's a plan for everything. Yeah. And I was in Tesco's one day, and there this good lady came up to me and said, hello, Eric. And it was the mother of these two racing drivers. They had a garage between King's Lynn and Downham Market, and I knew her, and she had very famous sons. I wish I could remember the names. At my age, I'm afraid, memory's gone. And I told her all about my dream about television.
Was this Tony Barnett?
No. She said, you must talk to Tony Barnett about this at the College of Further Education.
Right.
So she said, I'll fix it up. So she arranged it.
Right.
And I had a meeting with Tony Barnett. He was the head of the media department at the College of Further Education.
Right.
And obviously they were teaching the students television and what's it and everything like this. So I said to him, well, what you should do, why don't you set up a television station?
Within the college?
Within the college, your own television station.
So it was academic teaching, not actually doing stuff at the time?
At the time, they were just, you know, the students were preparing a film over a period, and just filming and bits and pieces. But I suggested, well, make a television station. So he brought me an interview with the principal, which I had, and everybody was very enthusiastic about it, I'm pleased to say.
They were, yes.
And so in those days they used to have you know, for funding, you'd employ a person like a solicitor. And so we employed this man to apply for government funding for it.
Right.
And we got a grant of £200,000 to set it up, which was very nice.
Yes.
And the principal was very enthusiastic. He's either retired or moved on now. But he set up a committee, and I was on the committee, obviously.
Got to have a committee.
Absolutely. And we set the thing up and got it going.
Brilliant.
And I'm pleased to say that it's still going strong today. If you Google Springboard Television, you will get that television station from the students at King's Lynn.
Brilliant. So what sort of stuff do they cover? Within the college or wide?
Outside things, bits, college things, it's everything. I must confess that I don't look at it very much. But I go every year to present the prizes.
Good.
And I must say, and this is a great joy to me, that every year with the prize presentation, you know, when they present prizes, I was asked the first year to go when we're just starting it, and we went, and there could only have been 20 people at this prize giving.
Right.
And I said to the staff there, I said, well, if you go follow my ideas, you'll fill this place.
In a few years' time.
Last year, when I presented the prizes, that place was packed out. It was a big cinema, it's a theatre in King's Lynn, packed solid.
Brilliant.
And I quoted it, and by a strange coincidence, the good lady, whom I'm telling you, the mother of the two ladies, she had also been asked along to present a prize.
Brilliant.
And so I was able to talk to her. So it shows you how what comes round goes round. What's the expression? I'm not
You've
sure.
just got to survive, haven't you?
You've just got to
survive. You had a previous arrangement, or looking to develop an arrangement with Argent, because they were looking.
Oh yes. Now in King's Lynn, see, one of the things before I went to the college, I thought, well, the thing to do is to go to the local press. So I got in touch with Argent, and I discovered that their office in King's Lynn, they had 150 employees in it.
Really?
It's a lot.
That's
I think
a
they covered the whole area,
yeah.
I think. But because of the decline in local newspapers, it had gone down to 50 from 150. It's gone down to a third.
Hell of a drop,
it's a
isn't
big
it?
drop. And they had the first floor was virtually empty.
All right.
So I enthused the local manager, and he got in touch with the regional manager, and we were discussing the possibility of my doing on their first floor what
you did at Stoke Ferry. Set it up.
You know, a proper studio for having a local King's Lynn television station. But then, of course, this all tied up with my wife getting unhappy and wanting to move, and now thinking of moving to Ipswich, and so unfortunately it didn't go any further. But of course, Argent picked up the idea.
Mustard.
And you know that they have got Mustard Television in Norwich now.
Yeah, I don't know how that's running. I must have a
well,
look.
Well, this is the Ofcom ones. You see, basically, I think the future lies on the internet, because you've got the smart televisions now. You just take your television set, switch it on, you go straight onto the internet. So, in other words, you can have your local television as an internet television. Ofcom, who, as you know, do the broadcasting, they grant these licenses. They granted, I think, 10 or 15 licenses for television stations.
They did.
And unfortunately, of those 15, I think 9 or 10 of them ceased to do it. And the main reason for this, you know, I may be wrong about this, but the main reason, I think, is that today, television is quite a different thing. You have the reality shows, which are a different kettle of fish, but the bulk of the stuff, it's all scripted. So in other words, you're going to have a show. This show, for instance, would be fully scripted.
So 3 weeks later, we might have got 10
So you've got 2 or 3 people scripting it and what's it. Then obviously, if it's scripted, it's got to be rehearsed.
Right, okay.
And once it's rehearsed, then when you're actually doing it, you've got to keep to your script. So you have an auto cue. So everybody's reading from auto cues.
Right.
And then the thing is edited.
Yes.
And for instance, we've got an arrangement with the BBC in Norwich, who are very kind to us. We take a number of our people from Felixstowe Television here to the BBC in Norwich.
Yes, we must do one soon.
And our volunteers, this is part of what we offer to our volunteers. And we've got to have one. I think you're going to go on.
Yes, I am.
But you see, the problem is that this takes time and money.
Yes.
And there isn't the time and money in local television as there is in national television.
No.
But they try to operate the local television on the same basis.
And you can't really. It's going to be much more spontaneous.
So just to give you an instance of this, the BBC in Norwich, they put on half an hour news every day. And do you know how many people it takes to do that?
I don't know. When you look at the number, a fair number, I would have thought.
There are 109 full-time people working in Norwich for the BBC to produce that half an hour a day. Now, the cost, the BBC for ordinary national television, the cost is between £500 per minute and £5,000 per minute. Now, that's a lot of money.
It is.
And it's all right for national television, but if we're going to take the local news forward, you can't do it. So this is one of the reasons why I've always been very enthusiastic, why we've got Felixstowe Television. We're one of the leading stations in the country. There's only 1 or 2 others doing it. And it's because we don't do that. Everything we try and do is like... And do you know, our costs, not 500...
No, don't even go there.
£500 a minute or £5,000 per minute, we do it for under £1 a minute. So this is how, in 10 years' time, there will be stations like this, Felixstowe Television, all over the country.
Depending what model they come into, because if we look at the widening of the offer, the 15 big ones, because a number of those were taken over by newspapers.
Oh yes.
And they've gone the BBC way, perhaps.
Yes. Well,
and
you know,
you can't have that depth, can you? It's just far too expensive.
No.
So I think Eric's being a very brave man by endeavouring to predict the future, because what we don't know anymore, do we, is the rate of technical change is huge and rapid. Yes. And today's wonderful scheme falls out of favour next week.
Well, it does.
Because I understand Twitter is sort of being less... Facebook is losing numbers now.
Is it really?
Yeah. And a lot of it is flavours and driven more by young folk, I suppose.
But you see...
But I think I agree with you that if the television set in your home will be able to readily pick up internet stations as well as, then you cracked it.
But this is the smart television. Every television set that's being sold today is a smart television, and you go straight into the internet. And hopefully, if, you know, I'm not saying it's my idea.
No.
This idea of local news and local television stations, you can set them up. £5,000 will set up a television station. There should be local television stations all over the country. Yes. And you see, basically my idea, once again, is that you just go on to sort of a local television page, and then you pick out your town. We'll look at Blackpool, or we'll look at Felixstowe, or we'll look at whatever. Yeah. And if it's done like this, we've got some very valuable volunteers. They get, it's a win-win situation, because they learn how to do it, and it's marvellous. You can learn how to present. Look at the way you've learned how to present.
Well, I make a fist. But what is interesting is the way, looking at the volunteers that we've had, the younger folk seem to be coming in to do the technical bit, and the editing and the shooting.
Yes.
With the greys doing a bit. So you've actually got generational connection, haven't you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Older population connecting to the young, and it works. Yes. That works very effectively.
And you see, one of the big problems...
It should be supported more by local councils and governments.
Should be, yes. But one of the big problems...
Local businesses.
One of the big problems is that the students, every College of Further Education is teaching media. They're teaching camera work, they're teaching editing, they're teaching all the different things. And what I consider to be the saddest thing out, and the figures which were given to me by fairly up people, I can't vouch for their accuracy, is that 98%, now this is a big percentage, 98% of the students in these colleges of further education who are studying media do not get jobs in the media world.
I can believe that.
And the reason for it is very simple. The media world only want to employ people who've got experience, and you can't get the experience unless you get a job.
Yeah.
So it's a vicious circle, you know, it's a chicken and egg situation.
There was a situation here that we weren't employing physiotherapists because they wanted experienced ones, and there aren't any.
Yeah.
So you've got to give people a chance, haven't you?
So this is where the joy of this is, and this is why I think film stations and television stations like the Felixstowe television, why I think we're ahead. Felixstowe's ahead, first in the class, so to speak, because students are able to gain the experience here, and they're able to show their work, say, well, we were with Felixstowe television for 6 months or a year, and be able to produce their work,
and this is our body of work.
They can then go into the big people and get the work.
Yeah.
And of course there's great possibilities. I'm doing this really to try and get a few more volunteers.
No, I wouldn't believe that for a minute, Eric. Not volunteers. No. Actually, you do. Well, one thing is that for the younger element, they're here, then they're on to university, etc. So we do, if young folk want to get into shooting, editing, presenting,
it's all here,
you know,
the opportunities
program
here.
ideas, we're wide open, very approachable.
And we have a great number of volunteers. As you know, we run the Felixstowe radio as well.
Yes.
And we have over 80 volunteers for the radio, and that is, of course, an Ofcom license.
Yes, indeed.
And we're hoping we'll get more sponsors for that. So.
Yes. Well, as you know, I do a bit on the radio, and I actually enjoy the radio.
Yes. Well,
because it's there's something much. I don't know what it is.
You're not exposed so much. You're tucked away. Nobody can see you.
Well, it doesn't matter what you're wearing.
You've got all your notes there, and if you want,
you can go off on a trip.
Your mind goes blank. You can just switch over to a record.
Yeah.
So well, let's go back to the music now.
But I don't know. They are. They're nice and they're very compatible one with another. But I think different people, different strokes for different.
But as you know, we're trying to link the television and the radio together, and hopefully this is going to come about in the near future. But anyway, we've strayed from my life.
Let us just pop to Ipswich. Now, your initial purchase in Ipswich wasn't for you. It was for a family member.
It was for my daughter.
And then fortuitously for you.
The house next door came. Right. So we enjoyed restoring that house. I seem to make a
You spend a lot of time restoring.
I counted up, and we have restored over 19 houses
in your life,
the length and breadth of England.
That's great.
We've lived on the top of a mountain, we've lived in the middle of a wood, we've lived by a river, we've lived in the centre of a town, and then of course from Ipswich we, one of my daughters discovered Felixstowe.
Yes,
she found this house down on the seafront at Felixstowe, and it was not in a very good condition.
Right.
But we went and looked at it, and my wife fell in love with it.
Yeah, well, it's a lovely setting.
And believe me, we've been in Felixstowe now for 5 years, living by the sea. It's the house next to Floodyers.
Yeah.
So we're right on the front there. We're facing south.
You are.
And
which is a rare event in East Anglia.
Yes. Yeah. But because of that, my wife fell in love with it. In the last two years of her life, she was happy. And she used to sit looking at the sea. And I think it made up for all the years of trouble which I gave to her.
Well, that is brilliant. And an awful lot of people do like to come to the seaside, don't they, when they retire?
Well, this is it.
And perhaps it's something primeval in us calling us back to the sea from whence we came. Well, I don't know, but it is those that got that. Yes. And it's continually changing, isn't it? Just looking at it.
When we first came to Felixstowe, I went down on the beach, and there was an elderly man walking along. And I said, "It's lovely here, isn't it?" He said, "I've been here for 30 years."
Oh, right.
And he said, "I came the first day and I thought, this is beautiful." And he said, "I came here today after 30 years. I've been coming every day, and I still feel as strongly about it.
Isn't
It's the
that
most
lovely?
wonderful place in the world.
Yeah.
And of course, you know the story about Felixstowe, about the Empress of Germany.
Yes, indeed, I do.
I'll just repeat it in case any of the listeners haven't heard it, because I think
Well, a reason why to look into Felixstowe.
yeah, because you see, she wasn't well.
No.
And this is all down with the council on one of the seafront things. This is where I read it the first time. But she came, she wanted to have somewhere. She wasn't well, she was ill, she had a convalescence. And she said, I must find somewhere wonderful to go to convalesce.
And her ambassador
So she
found
sent her
Felixstowe.
ambassador,
Yes.
no, just to let full story. The ambassador went to visited every town on the south coast and every town on the east coast, and he came up with Felixstowe. And he said Felixstowe is the best. And the reason for it is because it's got water on either side.
Oh yes, got a
It's
micro-
facing the site. I'm sorry,
South.
facing the south. And it's got a climate of its own. And
Yes.
very often you can drive, well, you know, if you drive from Felixstowe into Ipswich, the
It's
weather
raining.
changes.
Yeah, it does.
And you
Markedly.
come back and the sun is shining in
Yeah.
Felixstowe. The
No,
sun
it
always
is.
shines in Felixstowe.
It does
So,
often.
yes,
It really
yes.
does. But I think the other thing that drove the choice was the fact that the Kaiser and the rest were all into big boats. They were all into the 26-metre racing,
really?
which is, and they provided crews out of
Oh, I didn't
Woodbridge.
know
And
that.
so, whilst the ladies did their bit,
Yes.
the kings and monarchs
Oh,
and
they were
heads
able
up,
to play.
they were off
Oh,
playing.
now that's something I didn't
And that's
know.
where the golf came in, that's
Isn't-
where the tennis came
isn't
in.
that
So
interesting?
it was a bit like in New York, you've got the Hamptons, haven't you?
Yes,
4.
yes,
Well,
yes.
this was the Hamptons, but much earlier.
Oh,
and
I
whatever.
see. Oh, isn't that
And that's
good?
where all the money came from.
Well, that's
I mean,
very
that's
good,
And that's
isn't
why
it?
we've got such wonderful architecture
Ah,
through
of
and out
course,
the
yes,
town,
I know,
because
yes.
it was the place to be.
And you see-
had the railway that ran in.
Yeah,
you know.
and they had 3 railway stations here.
I know.
And it would have become another Brighton.
It would
And my theory is why it didn't become another Brighton.
flood.
Pardon?
It was the flooding.
I don't think so. What I think it is the only town in England where you cannot drive right the way along the front promenade. You brake. There's no other town I
I'd
can
hate to
think of.
disagree with you, but in 1874 and
Yes.
18, there was significant flooding
Yeah.
in the area where Tomlin had wanted to build the town.
Oh, really?
And it was only when they built the promenade in 1902
Yes.
that you actually protected that area.
Yes.
But as we saw in 53, when we
Yes.
had that significant flood that
Yes.
killed 41 people,
Yeah.
building on a floodplain is
Yes,
not a
it's not
sensible
right. No,
thing
well,
to do.
that could have
So,
been-
I mean, it was,
Yeah.
and what you had was a big battle between the Tullammarshes and
Yeah.
Cobbles
Oh, I see.
with Tomlin.
Well,
They
you-
wanted to build on the hill,
you-
and
You know the history of Felixstowe.
So that
you must
bit-
do a programme about it.
but what was
the
lovely?
happy- go on, you tell me
I mean, what
lovely.
was lovely really was that the Empress of Germany actually made it a must-go-to type resort. She
Absolutely,
put the
yes.
seal of
Yes.
approval
But
on it.
best bit of all,
Yes.
you know what's the best? We'll finish on it.
Right.
It is surrounded by water, and
That's
you know
the
what?
key.
Do you know what being surrounded by water means?
I don't seaweed.
Freedom from witches.
Oh,
The witches cannot get at you, and so Felixstowe. This is why
We're
it's such a happy
witch-free?
place. We're witch-free.
Well, on that unbelievable revelation, here we are in Felixstowe that is apparently witch-free. We'll be back next week, won't we?
Yes.
Lovely to see you.
Nice to see you.
And
Thank you.
we'll move on, because
We'll
we've
move
just
on.
got to Ipswich, and
Yeah.
we'll be out of
Yes,
that
we'll
shortly.
be out of that, yes.
Okay.
Take care.
So thank you for being with us. See you the next time. Bye-bye, Eric. Bye-bye, Bella. She's got a sleep record. Sorry, Bella.